Focus is going to be good right for the next hour. Well, hello. It is 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time in Long Beach, California, and wherever you may be joining us from. Welcome to our last hour of our Giving Tuesday Give-A-Thon. We started really early this morning, hoping that we could gather some fine folks in other continents and countries, and we have, and we did. We had folks join us from places like Paraguay and Belfast, Ireland, and New Zealand, and throughout the United States, country after country. So we have been sitting in this very spot since 7 a.m. Pacific time. And for the better part of today, we've had this really fun Give-A-Thon marathon. I'm channeling my inner teacher. This is my Zoom 203 corner. And in my Zoom 203 corner, every single day I sit here and I teach. I work with middle school students and high school students and sassy fifth graders. And so it's a special place. It's been a special place since the pandemic happened. And for the next hour, we're gonna tell you what the Freedom Riders have been up to. We're gonna show you some special moments of what we've created in the midst of a pandemic. And my hope is that if you have questions in the audience, send them to us. My hope is if you donate, since it is Giving Tuesday, that I can do a personal shout out to you live and in real time. So welcome. I want to give you a little update of how we've spent the better part of our 11 hours of our 12-hour marathon. During the pandemic, we began our podcast series moving into what we affectionately call Freedom Forum. And what that is me sitting knee to knee, side by side, masked up or not, with a special guest. We transform that interview into both a podcast and a live watch party. And throughout the year, it's been amazing to turn those live interviews into a forum for us to chit chat and talk, sometimes invite the guest to chit chat along with us and to get a little down and dirty. It started out of the necessity of chaos when we were all in our pajamas, when we were all home, and it has grown into something that we all look forward to. Who's going to say yes? Little secret, I am completely terrified of rejection, but most of the people we've asked have said yes. Find folks like Danny DeVito, folks like Hot Patrick Dempsey. We've had authors, we've had activists, we've had accidental activists, we've had people who are out on the front line fighting the good fight, and everything in between. And every time we gather, I'm like a student. I'm the nosy student who raises my hand way too many times and asks our wonderful guests to face a fear, current or past, share a story, current or past, and tell their truth. And it's those three objectives, facing and telling and sharing, that we learn a lot. And so today I chose my 5 favorite interviews from 2021. It has been quite an odyssey. So we started the day off with my candid conversation with Congresswoman Nanette Berrigan. I have known Nanette for 20 years. I knew her when she was simply a student at UCLA. We were friends. She was on our Freedom Rider board. And then one day, as Freedom Riders tend to do, she announced, I think I'm going to run for Congress. An ordinary person striving for extraordinary heights. So we all said, yep, we'll help you. And she is now in the halls of Congress. She is a Latina. Her family is undocumented. She's a first-generation high school graduate, first-generation college graduate. She went off to law school, and now she's in the Capitol. So that was an amazing interview of what is it like to be in a place of power and to fight the good fight. And prior to his passing, she got to work beside our namesake, our legend, Congressman John Lewis, an original Freedom Rider, who was apt to say to get into good trouble. And he did just that. He was arrested over 40 times for causes he believed in. And he did fight the good fight, a fierce fighter at that. So I'm so proud that she got to work beside him, with him, for him, and his legacy lives on. After we had that incredible chat with Nanette Bergen, we had an incredible discussion, a tearful discussion with my dear friend, Judy Shepard. She's the accidental activist. She is on fire. But she was a mom who cared about her boys. And sadly, one of her boys, her eldest son, Matthew, was tied to a fence in Wyoming and died. And it sent shockwaves out into the universe. Matthew was simply living his authentic self. Matthew in college had come out to his family and friends. And because he was living authentically, sadly, he lost his life. So it threw his parents' world upside down, and they started a foundation and challenged the laws of those folks in Congress to have hate crime legislation. And she's still fighting for the LGBTQIA community. She is still fighting for anyone who has been an other or marginalized. She is still fighting to give a voice to the voiceless. And I promise you, when we were in this interview doing this dance, I think Matthew was there. I felt him. There were these lights, this beautiful light array behind her in her home in Wyoming. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Matthew was with us in spirit and in light as we interviewed. He always wanted to be famous, and indeed he is. Sadly, the wrong kind of fame, but his voice is still permeating throughout the land. And I'm so proud that Judy was able to add some color to his story and make him more human. Following that amazing interview, we segued into something that happened here in America that was tragic. There was a hashtag Stop AAPI Hate, Asian American Pacific Islander Hate. And in the midst of a pandemic, sadly, as many of you know, a lot of Asian Americans were targeted, walking to the grocery stores, standing on a street corner. And so we hosted an incredible podcast / Freedom Forum with Kanya Sim, an original freedom writer, and the incredible actress who portrayed her named Jackie. And the three of us kind of sat together and just talked about stereotypes and stigmas and colorism. It was fascinating. There was a gentle hum, a little lull, and that was because at my feet was my beloved baby Bo. My dog, my 140-pound lab, was lying at our feet. And as I watched today, I got sad because I recently lost that beautiful Bo. But he is there with us in spirit because he was lying at our feet and making beautiful, beautiful noise. Following that incredible interview where we cried a lot, we laughed a lot, and we dared to dream a lot, we had a moving and inspiring conversation with Temple Grandin. For those of you that know, especially those in the education sector, Temple is this autism advocate. She's an ally for education, for people who learn different. She herself is on the autism spectrum. She is self-proclaimed Asperger's. And as we went through her past and her present, we learned how education has changed. Oh my God, when she was a kid, they wanted to institutionalize her. She didn't speak until she was a child about 4 or 5. Schools didn't want her. They didn't know what to do with her. And because of her experience, she's an advocate for every kid, anyone who is isolated, anyone that's in a resource program, anyone that feels that they are being ostracized or curriculum is watered down. So it was a really powerful interview where she's an advocate and fighting for all of those kids that realize there is no one size fits all in education. We can't teach solely to a test. We got to teach to a kid. So what an amazing experience. Some of you might have seen the film based on her life starring Claire Danes called Temple Grandin. Won several Emmys, including Best Picture and also Best Actress. So it was an amazing opportunity to bring her story to life, live and in person. For those of you that were with us to the bitter end of our 11-hour marathon, you got to see a glimpse of Anna Quinlan. Oh my God, as a nerdy English teacher, as a wannabe writer, I got to interview a Pulitzer Prize winning author who's written over 20 books, had columns in both Newsweek and the New York Times. Are you kidding me? And she has written about the Freedom Writers. She wrote the foreword to our book, Teaching Hope, with 150 teachers, where she praised them in honor of her own sister, who is an educator. And so for her to demystify the power of writing, and I just assumed that she's a badass, which she is, but I just kind of assumed that it was easy and effortless and that she picked up a pen or a quill or a keyboard and just wrote. And she talked about butts in seats, write what needs to be written. And my favorite quote that I took away from her actually was coined by Robert Frost: no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader. And that's something that we in Freedom Writer world over the last 2 years have really embraced, have empathy for. And with our new book project, there was a lot of tears in our writers. And thus, when this book comes out, I suspect there's going to be a lot of tears in you readers. So what an amazing opportunity for me to share my 5 favorite guests, my 5 favorite interviews, my 5 favorite folks who took us on this journey of how do we survive a pandemic that seems to persist? How do we kind of reinvent ourselves? And I think we're all sort of kind of still doing that, whether you're back in school full time, whether you're on a hybrid model, whether you are still online, whether you're masked up, whether you're vaccinated with wherever you may lie on that spectrum, we've all had to reinvent ourselves. And I think that's really where we as a Freedom Writer family find ourselves. I'm here in my Zoom 203 corner, and I'm here in my Zoom 203 corner because I spent the first part of my career standing next to a chalkboard, inevitably with chalk on my butt, flailing and fidgeting, terrified at all, trying to teach 150 kids. And all of you educators know it is terrifying every moment of every day. It might be successful first period and you might fail miserably second period, and then you switch it up in third. The same has now happened for all of us who have had to reinvent ourselves as educators or parents or citizens online. I stand between a child in pajamas and Fortnite. I try to take something pithy and incredible and make somebody put down their video game and pay attention for a second or two. I try with my amazing colleagues to make sense of the madness. And let's be honest, it was mad. It is still maddening. But what I'd love to do is share with you some of the questions we've received throughout the day that I can answer for you. And if you've got a burning question, send it our way like a message in a bottle, and I'll answer it for you. So the first question I received is from one of our beloved students. Last year, he was in 5th grade. This year, he is a sassy 6th grader. His name is Anthony. And Anthony attended Ramona Elementary. Sadly, my sweet Anthony moved from Ramona Elementary to Texas. Anthony had it really rough. Anthony had a really tough background. And Anthony shared with all of us one day, to my dismay, that he was in the foster care system, kind of bouncing from family member to family member, and that took him to Texas in the middle of a pandemic. Things weren't right and things weren't normal. And on one fateful day, we had a discussion about bullying, and Anthony went there. He's 10, and he unmuted himself and he shared a story, and it was heart-wrenching. And in that moment, I realized even for a 5th grader at 10 years old, we have to have those courageous conversations. We have to be real and relevant. And so we decided to make our curriculum that we were in the midst of tweaking and creating go down to a 5th grader all the way to a college student and anything in between. So I think it's really telling that my first question is from Anthony, who was now in 6th grade. And he said, Miss G, I just moved from California to Texas, as you know, and I'm having a hard time fitting in. How can you help me? Fitting in. I think we all fidget with that, whether we are adults, whether we are kids. I struggle with it every day in this very corner. I'm not very tech savvy, as Freedom Riders will let you know. And when the pandemic hit us, I was terrified of going live in Zoom in a corner where when I flailed, and I did, and I fidgeted when I did, wires suddenly came out of said machines, screens went black, and they resorted to handcuffing me to my chair, bubble wrapping me, and making sure that there were no fiascos live in real time. So I get it, Anthony. And so since we spent so much time with you last year, sweet little Anthony, what we were able to do is go back to the curriculum we started and try to make it better. And what I mean by better is to be fast and furious for that kid with an attention span of like 37 seconds. Fast and furious for a kid who wants to play Fortnite but needs to do English literature. Fast and furious for a kid who would rather download something or watch Netflix marathons. How can we be the marathon? And so what I want to show you, for those of you at home, is some of the things that Anthony and his kindred spirit helped us do differently and better. So the first thing I want to show you, which I'm really proud of, is we had a few Freedom Riders in those first few days of the pandemic volunteer to come into our office. Yes, they had dodged bullets when they were kids on their way to room 203. They were dodging a virus in the middle of the pandemic, coming to our office and saying, there's got to be a kid somewhere in a really dark place, a kid somewhere that is scared and anxious and being bullied and not fitting in. So how can we help? The very first person who showed up was my boy Narada. And my boy Narada, we chose him. He is diarist 24 in the Freedom Riders Diary. And Diary 24 is a story about being homeless. What we figured then, which became a reality now, is that people were going to lose their livelihoods. People were going to lose their homes. And for someone like Narada, who was homeless, wrote about it, immortalized it in our book, and then that very scene made its way onto the screen. We realized, let's start there. So he became our first theme for what we thought was going to be a couple. You know, this pandemic was going to pass, we'll jump back into reality, and all will be right with the world. It's still not right. But what is right is these Freedom Riders saying, let's identify the things that really matter. Let's go to where a kid is at. So I'm going to put on the screen Narada. He is my thing. Oh, look at Narada. Look at him pointing at you. It feels almost like he's heading to DC, which ironically, that's where this photo was taken. Freedom Riders, Freedom Rider teachers for Teacher Appreciation Day years ago, went to Washington, DC with books and stories in hand. And this was Narada's photo. He was pointing at congressmen, he was pointing at senators, he was pointing at anyone and everyone with power and authority saying, we're coming. So I really love this photo. But as Narada has so apt to say, he puts the R in resilience. So we always start with our kids with these really deep and powerful themes, whether it's resilience with Narada, whether it's perseverance with Norma, whether it's universality with Maddie. Each and every Freedom Rider has promised to speak to a kid. They have 55 minutes, they have an hour, and in that hour, we have to bring resilience to life. Make it real, make it relevant. In 55 minutes to an hour, we've got to make that theme stick by engaging them, enlightening them, but most importantly, empowering them. So when that lesson plan is over, it's not really over. So this is what I do every day. I started with Narada, and at the end of this journey, we're going to have 36 36 themes because there are 36 weeks in an academic school year for those 180 days. And what's exciting is 36 freedom writers, 36 have come to this very office, have chosen their theme, have read their story, have made an amazing video. And our hope is that we reach some kid in some place. So I want to show you, based on the question that Anthony said about fitting in, that sometimes family is what we make. Sometimes family is what we choose. And as those of you that remember, Diary 24 takes a young boy at 14 who could have and should have been hopeless, a young boy at 14 who was homeless, and there's still hope. And there is a home in room 203, a home in a classroom in a school with brothers and sisters of his making. And so what each and every freedom writer have done, which is so great, is they pick this scene, the scene in the movie, and they bring it to life. They bring it to life for kids to put down that video game, to put down that movie, and to be wrapped, to have their attention saying, I look like that person, or I talk like that person, and I share their story. So in honor of the Anthonys who don't fit in, I wanted to show a little video that is in honor of those 36 freedom writers. Every single one of them have committed to a theme, to a story, and this is Latia. I like to refer to Latia as our Beyonce. She's beautiful, distractingly so. But what I loved about Latia at Anthony's age, 5th and 6th grade is tender, especially middle school. There's a lot of mean girl middle school drama for those young women. And so when sweet Latia was in middle school, like Anthony, she didn't fit in. She didn't have the right clothes, the right shoes, the right zip code, the right address, the right braids, the right anything. And in that housing project she grew up in, she equated it when she met a Holocaust survivor to what she felt like a concentration camp, one way in and one way out. And while she was in that housing project as that middle schooler, she saw things that no kid should see, heard things that no kid should hear. And some of those things were directed at her. She was bullied, she bullied, and she was also a bystander. But somehow, some way, being in my class and having this opportunity, this moonshot moment to pick up a plastic champagne glass and to make a toast to James. That's exactly what she did. So our hope is with each and every time these freedom writers make these 2-minute mini movies, that with that theme, with that 2 minutes, that someone can walk away and say, I too can change. Like Gandhi, I can be the change I wish or want or need to see in the world. So this is my beautiful Beyonce Latia talking at students like Anthony and making him realize that even if you don't fit in now, it gets better. And don't we all need that? Don't we all need the better? So this is Latia speaking directly to an Anthony about hope and about transformation. Could we get 2 donations? I was just told, my sweet Sue Ellen, you can see the scene, but we can't hear it. So let me narrate for all of you what you just saw. We're going to reboot it. Latia, my sweet Latia, isn't she pretty? I'm very biased. I'm like the proud parent that everyone is perfect. I'm the shameless matchmaker, even to this very day. But what you're going to see in a moment is Latia speaking directly to students. We asked them to sit at a chalkboard in our office and to speak their truth. As I said earlier, face of fear, tell a truth, share a story, but have a face in mind. It could be your younger self, Latia, with those braids. It could be an Anthony who is bullied because his eyebrows are so light that he gets teased for not having eyebrows, whatever the story may be, and share. And that's exactly what Latia does. While bringing her story to life, the background is always the feature film, because let's face it, that's our competition. If a kid could watch a movie for 2 hours or read a book that might take them 2 weeks, they're going to start with a movie. So we might as well go where they're at. So let's check out again. Let's see if we can get that volume to work. And if not, I'm not as sexy or as pretty as Beyonce, my Latia, but I can narrate just as well. So let's try once again to see if Latia can bring her story to life.
When I watched the movie for the first time, I noticed the journal writing and the voiceover about how we were going to start to begin anew. Erin fostered that amongst the Freedom Writers. She allowed us to come together to make very significant changes in our lives.
Listen to me. Everyone in this room has a chance to graduate. For some, you'll be the first in your family, the first with a choice to go to college. And you did that, not me.
The most impactful scene for me was the Toast for Change. Erin was giving us a chance to start over and begin with something new.
I want each of you to step forward and take one of these glasses of sparkling cider. We're each gonna make a toast for change. And what that means is, the person you were before this moment, that person's turn is over. Now it's your turn.
I toasted for myself that I would never allow anyone to tell me that I'm not able to make it. I had a lot of family members and friends look at me as, oh, you're gonna be like us, that average person who won't make it, you won't go to college. I really wanted to toast that I'm never gonna be the same. I'm gonna pave my own way. I'm an only child, so I never was able to look up to anyone. But by being a freedom writer, I had individuals who were in the same spot as me, who really wanted more for their lives. Today, I stand by myself and I trust myself to give my best to someone else. And Erin gave that to us. She gave me the voice to say, look, I'm gonna change my life and do something different and be something different.
My Latia, oh my goodness. I got to tell you, we got some amazing people that I get to work with and beside, and they get to boss me around every single day when I'm feeling insecure of how we take these ideas from our brain and put them out in the world to reach a kid. And so each and every one of those mini movies, 3 minutes or less, 2 minutes or less, move you. Make you get that little lump in your throat, make you get a little welled up in the eyes. And it's amazing that all these years later, freedom writers still go there. For all of you who are joining us, I feel like I am channeling my inner Jerry Lewis. That ages me. For those of you that remember those telethons where Jerry Lewis was out soliciting the world for help. But I do want to do a special shout out for those of you that just like donated live and in real time while I've been babbling and yakking away. So a special shout out to Lisa Arciniega. Thank you. I'm honored to work beside her sweet son. I am also honored that I get to help him in his educational journey, knowing that at some moment I'm going to lose that brilliant young man to the likes of a UCLA or a Harvard when he continues his educational journey by getting a master's in education and becoming a classroom teacher. You know, he teaches beside me each and every day, but Lisa, as you know, he's brilliant and we are just the foundation and he is going to reach for the sky. So I actually turned in his UCLA letter of recommendation late last night. So 1 down, 5 more to go. So thank you, Lisa. I also want to say thank you to Doug Taylor. Oh my goodness, thank you, Doug, for donating. Amazing. And also Gonzalo. So any of you that are out there and like, I'd love to donate. Each and every dollar that is donated helps us with the curriculum I'm talking about. And for those of you that donate either on Facebook or Instagram, they're going to match it 100%. I know some of you have psychological problems with Facebook and Instagram. I get it. I don't even have a personal Facebook page, but today I donated. Today, Mark Zuckerberg is going to match my money. So no matter what you think about the evil empire, today and today only, Facebook and Instagram is going to match every dollar. I hope they're not listening to me now, and I hope I don't get hit by a lightning bolt. But if any of you do donate on Instagram or Facebook, they'll match it, as they should. They got a gazillion dollars, and they have afforded us the opportunity during a pandemic to speak to kids, to speak to teachers. But I love shaking down folks at the highest levels and saying, pay it back, pay it forward, pay it down to those kids, because let's face it, folks, there is a digital divide, and I will shout that to the rooftops. So the kids that we humbly serve, they are part of that digital divide. They've got crappy Chromebooks that they were given from a school. They don't have Wi-Fi or hotspots in their homes. We had a sweet little boy who had to walk about 1.5 miles to a Starbucks just to connect. So we've lived it in real time. We've looked demoralizingly so out into an online class, and all the kids have black screens, because you know what? They're at home with 6 to 7 to 10 people, and they're embarrassed. There's chaos behind them. And so they don't want us to judge where they live and what their home looks like. So the digital divide is real. But for today, we're gonna shake that tree of those behemoth monsters and say pay it forward. So for any of you that donate, I want to do a special shout out to you. This is Giving Tuesday. It's a Give-A-Thon, and we're hoping that you feel inspired to help us help others. Speaking of helping us help others, one of my favorite moments in our curriculum is our very first lesson plan. We always start with this triangle of the bully. We all know the bully, the bullied. Oftentimes the bully becomes the bullied, and the bystander. It's insipid and insidious, and we've seen it firsthand. We actually worked with a school who lost a 13-year-old boy in real time between math class. He was lured outside by his buddies. There was a punch, there was a splat, and he hit the floor, went into convulsions, and sadly lost his life. 8th grade. And so we always start with bullying, because even the little Anthony's in 5th grade know what it's like to be on the receiving end of that. So I am here today because of bullies. You know, I had 150 kids who sat somewhere on that equation. Maybe they were bullied like Latia. Maybe they were the bully like you're about to see with Melvin. Maybe they were a bystander like Narada. But somehow, some way, I wanted my kids to not be bystanders or bullies or the bullied, and be an upstander. And what that means is to stand up and to speak up and to speak out in a society that often reminds you to stay in the darkness, to be on the fringe. So how could I get kids who had learned these lessons and these codes from the street to be able to say something? There's an adage, snitches get stitches. But my students saw things that no kid should see. In a city that had 126 homicides, they experienced things that no kid should experience in a city that had a racial reckoning and a riot. And many of them felt like the young man I'm going to pull up in a moment, that they walk through the streets with a bullseye on their chest, looking over their shoulder, wondering, am I next? Am I going to continue to stand in assembly lines at a funeral parlor? Am I going to continue bearing friends, or eventually a father, or am I next? It's a really hard space to start. And so when this young man walked into my classroom, he had a rap sheet, like so many of my students. Some had ankle monitors, some had probation officers, some had vanilla folders that told me all the locations they'd been kicked out of. Sadly, some of them were firmly in that school to prison pipeline. 3 of them I want to tell you about, and one of whom you'll meet in a moment. The bullied. His name was Sherrod, and Sherrod was sent to me from our rival high school, Poly. Yes, that Poly with all of those great football players. Sherrod was sent to me not by choice, not by volunteer, not by a PTA or a parent, but because when he was picked on by a teacher in a class, an English teacher no less, he brought a gun to school. And he told everybody, if she calls me out again, if she disses me, out will come the gun. So when I inherited Sherrod, he came with all kinds of bravado. He came with that Polly jersey. He came with that notice me mentality. And the scene was set. In comes Melvin, who had already been kicked out of every school he'd ever attended. He too had that bravado, but he was on the football team and he didn't like that jersey, that boy. And I think he thought it was kind of like chivalry. I don't like how Sherrod is teaching and or treating this clueless teacher with her polka dots and her pearls. So I think in a moment of chivalry, he decided to do something. And in the corner was my bystander, Carlos. Carlos was going to watch and wait. Carlos, as a bystander, was going to laugh and do a fist bump or a high five. Carlos was going to pass that note, pass the pun, and make sure that no one knew that he was involved. And so in this moment of chaos, in medias res fashion, out comes a piece of paper, out comes a pen, and Melvin drew this horrible caricature, racist in nature, with the warning to pass me, and that's fighting words. So with that pass me and that note, off it went like a forest fire, like a blaze. And those bystanders laughed. Those bystanders did high fives. Those bystanders would rather laugh at, not with, Sherrod. So in that moment, you've seen it play out in the movie, you've read about it in the book. I had this existential crisis. I had heard about Sherrod in that toxic teacher's lounge. I had heard about Melvin from the principal himself, because the year before, Melvin threw up on the principal's pants at one of the school dances, had been kicked out and came back yet again. I had heard about Carlos, this boy who'd been abandoned. So I had been warned to send them away. Send them to the principal, send them to the superintendent, send them anywhere. And so in this moment with those boys, I made a decision not to send them away, that we were going to handle our business in real time. And so I didn't realize then that this moment, this crash boom moment, would be a defining moment, would be the genesis, the catalyst for everything yet to come. And I didn't realize that Melvin, all these years later, would pick up a pen and be accountable. Pick up a pen and tell his side of the story. And in telling his side of the story, what was amazing is there was an apology that was so needed. There was a reckoning that we can all learn from. And there was a moment where he realized what I did was so wrong. It could have blown up. I could have been sent away. That fist could have turned to a gun. Those words could have become missives, and Miss G could have buried another baby, another student. So with our curriculum, what Melvin has done for kids across the world is he sat down at our chalkboard and he read his story. And it's hard and it's harrowing. And I like to believe it's heroic. And what Melvin was able to do is to say, I'm sorry. And in doing so, you feel the lump in his throat. In hearing it, you hear the gasp and you see the tenderness of this beautiful man who now is a father himself with a teenage boy. So in preparation for today, what we did is we took Melvin's story. He read the entire story for kids at home. And the idea was they can listen, they can watch, they can follow along. So if they're auditory learners or if they're visual learners, they can follow along with the book word for word, as there's now a face and a name to a story. Because for a lot of you readers, you pick up the Freedom Writer's Diary and you read a diary number. You don't know their name. You don't know their story. You don't even know their gender or their ethnicity. But the Freedom Writers want to pierce the veil and say, this is who I am. So in this moving montage of that meaningful story, you're going to see Melvin speaking directly to a kid, an Anthony of sorts, who doesn't quite fit in. And I think Melvin's hope is that for those bullies who are in that classroom, maybe they're listening to Anthony. Maybe they'll realize that if they're the bully, just like me, they too can apologize. So I'd like to introduce you to Melvin of the now as this amazing father, this husband, and this person who apologized, who's going to tell us about the Melvin then, that moment in my class, that crash, boom, bam moment, and that apology that we all desperately needed to hear. So this is my sweet Melvin about to tell you about what it means to say you're sorry. So this is my sweet Melvin.
I am one of the original Freedom Riders, and I will be reading Diary 1. Even though it's
I'm not hearing it. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding? Look at my job. It's not a job. It's, as my father once said it, it's a blessing and a burden, more so a blessing. So with that blessing, I want to thank all of you who are being so gracious and so generous as I tell you what we do every day, the Melvins of the world, the Latias of the world, the Tonys of the world. I thank you, Gail. Gail just donated on Facebook, and guess what? Dollar per dollar matching. I want to thank Marissa, who also just donated. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Once again, matching donation to Eric and to Brian, both also donated on Facebook. So those anonymous donors, thank you. For those who are donating on Give Lively, thank you. For those of you that are just taking a moment to pay it forward, I thank you. For those of you that have questions and comments, send them to us. And one just did. It's Wendy. Yes, you, Wendy. I wish I could reach through the screen and give you a hug. Wendy just said that the Freedom Writers, our little book, the book that we affectionately call the little book that could, sort of like that train going down the track. I think I can, I think I can. She said that the Freedom Writers is the most favorite film in the adolescent unit at College Hospital. The Freedom Writers Diary is also their favorite book. I know College Hospital. I have visited a College Hospital. Sadly, I took a student to College Hospital, and in our state, we have something called a 5150, and a 5150 is a 72-hour hold. You've seen the likes of it put on a Kanye West. You've seen the likes of it after a Britney Spears shaved her head. A 5150 allows the professionals to make a recommendation. Does this person need help? And in the world of Freedom Writers, my wounded healers, at a moment in time, one of my Freedom Writers desperately needed help. So Wendy, when you talked about College Hospital, I, like Melvin, get the lump in my throat. I, like Melvin, lose my words and have tears in my eyes, because I know that in places like that, if our movie or our book can be a light in a really dark place, if a kid, while they are struggling with their pain, to find some kind of purpose, when they desperately try to hide those scars, those licks, those wounds, and heal. If our book can be part of that healing process, that means the world to me. So Wendy, I'm going to ask you to send me the name of a student that is now in your home, and I'm going to pay it forward. Some of you are posting on Facebook, I want to send a book to a student that you are working with now. We'll put it in the mail tomorrow. And upon their release, may that book, personalized to them, be their light. So, Wendy, that reminds me of the Freedom Riders and how important it is to be the light when they themselves are in the darkest of dark places, when they themselves don't see themselves as a lighthouse. So the next example of what we've been doing here at the Freedom Rider Foundation is when these Freedom Riders are speaking to and for and about kids, they don't sugarcoat. They are real and as relevant as they were when they wrote, as real and as relevant as when we made this feature film, real and as relevant as they now speak to youth across the globe. So to show you how real and relevant these Freedom Riders are for our theme of hope, we didn't want leprechauns. We didn't want glitter and magic wands. We didn't even want rainbows. We wanted reality. And so in my mind, the perfect face for hope was Tony. Many of you have seen Tony on the cover of our book. Many of you know that we call him Pretty Tony now, and he is just that with his beautiful jet black hair. And when he stands on a stage, I feel like I'm at like the Grammy Awards. It's pretty amazing. But what I did not know when Tony walked into my class, like a lot of us teachers, is that Tony had this crippling struggle with mental health. He always had a smile. He always was in the middle of a circle telling the loudest joke. He always laughed to keep from crying. And for those of you that know and understand depression, Tony has it so bad that sometimes it hurts. Sometimes he doesn't want to get out of bed. Sometimes he doesn't want to face the world. There's a facade, there's a wall, there's a moat you can't penetrate. And so in the midst of this pandemic hit Tony where he lived. He just wanted a hug when we were socially isolating. He just wanted to have somebody touch him and feel him when we would push others away. So I asked Tony, come to the office and share your story. Even though you are the face of hope, I think we need to understand hopelessness first and foremost before we get to hope. That rainbow, that leprechaun, that pot of gold. So what Tony did for those kids at home was to put a face to hope. And it was about being alive at midnight. Alive at midnight. In this era of suicide ideation, in this era, just a few days ago, we reached a milestone in our country. 100,000 lives were lost due to the opioid addiction. 100,000 lives during this pandemic of the opioid addiction. So Freedom Riders know pain, Freedom Riders know struggle. And so Tony wanted to talk about the hope, which is possibility and promise, that begins at 12:01. Because at 12:01, it's a new day. So Wendy, in honor of your kids at College Hospital, I would like to show you how Tony brings to life the theory of hope. And I'm so glad that each and every one of your kids who may or may not be there on a 5150, I hope they too are alive at midnight. So this is my beloved Tony sharing his story.
Hope is the promise that tomorrow might be a little better than today. I have a saying that's kind of been my mantra since I was 16. Alive at midnight. Having depression and having the life that I've had, sometimes you have really bad days. And I would always tell myself, just be alive at midnight. Just stay alive until midnight. Because at 12:01, it's tomorrow. And tomorrow has the hope and the possibility that it might be a better day. It might still suck, but at least there's that hope that it might be okay. That's what hope means to me.
Alive at midnight. Alive at midnight. Amazing. I want to thank Kathy Carpenter, who just donated. On Facebook, it's matching. But I want to catch my breath for a moment, and I want to thank Hunter, because of course I remember you, Hunter. And if you don't mind, you could tell me to stop or tell me to solicit. But I met one of the most beautiful souls on Christmas Eve. 4 years we've been going to a juvenile hall. Last year was the first Christmas Eve we weren't there because there was a pandemic. And I had the honor and the privilege to meet Hunter in part of this rehabilitation, this reinvention, this renaissance of her. As she just put in our chat room, she was able to go to the documentary premiere, and she was called by society, not by herself, a felon and a drug addict. When I see her as this badass, this woman warrior who is brave and bold, who had the courage and the tenacity to reinvent herself. Hunter, who is no longer incarcerated. Hunter, who is now married and a mother, just donated on Facebook. Are you kidding me? I just want to sob. I just want to digress. I just want to hug you, Hunter. And so I hope you know, I'm never going to forget you. I'm never going to forget you. I remember when you were in that beautiful theater at Cal State Long Beach and I asked you to stand, and it was like 1,000 people in the audience, and you were so regal and you were so beautiful then. And I'm sure you are still beautiful now. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for putting a face and a name on a story. Thank you for showing all of us that we can reinvent and reimagine and have our own personal renaissance. Knocks me out. And that's just in, she's a nurse. She's a nurse, just like my sweet Calvin. You know, when Calvin first visited my classroom, he was on his 42nd foster home, 42nd. And he chose to be a wounded healer, and he chose to be a nurse in San Diego, which is where I first met Hunter. So the irony that sweet Hunter is now a nurse just shows how things go full circle, that sometimes those who were wounded become those wounded healers, those caregivers. What you don't know, Hunter, and what some of you may not know, is that my mother was a registered nurse. And this year, in the midst of chaos, on Anne Frank's 92nd birthday, we were celebrating posthumously Anne Frank's 92nd birthday with freedom writers and our student authors and teachers. We were taking a virtual tour of Anne Frank's attic, led by the museum curators at Anne Frank's attic in Amsterdam. In the midst of that tour, in the midst of that birthday, my phone started buzzing and then zinging and zapping, and my mother passed away in the midst of that tour on Anne Frank's 92nd birthday. So I still haven't processed it, but Hunter, she's a nurse, is, not was. She's a caretaker, as are you. So I'm so honored that you joined us. I'm so honored that you are helping and healing and letting folks be whole, and kudos to you. So that brings me to my last story. And my last story is about the next generation, the hunters of the world. In the midst of this pandemic, we wanted those young folks, those storytellers, to tell their story. None of us as adults know what it's like to go to school during a pandemic. None of us know what it's like to be in our PJs at home, in a box, on a screen, trying to learn. That fear, that virus, that violence. And so we reached out to our publishing house and asked if we could pitch this new idea. It's an activity we've done with all of our Freedom Writer teachers, nearly 800 strong, and we call it Dear Freedom Writer. And the gist of this activity was I would bring teachers from all over the globe, from the corners of Rwanda to Rhode Island, from places like London, all the way to New York, from places like Taiwan to Texas and everywhere in between. These 775 teachers, to be exact, have come to Long Beach, and on this day, sit knee to knee, eye to eye, shoulder to shoulder with original freedom writers. We send them off with a story, and unbeknownst to those teachers, the storyteller, oftentimes the very author of that story in the Freedom Writer's Diary, is sitting beside them. They read, they write, they cry, and they share stories, because in that very cocoon, in that hermetically sealed bubble, many of those teachers have gone through the exact same story. So they write a letter. They write a letter like it's a message in a bottle. They write a response. And that response is the most important thing. It's like the solution. It's the aha. It's the it gets better. I know, because I've lived through it. And I have the licks and the scars and the wounds that have made me stronger. So with that activity, a book was born. And with that book, we asked those 775 teachers to nominate a kid, and they did. And those kids started at the age of 10 all the way through 20. And these young folks, no matter where they were, which corner of their continent, their country, their county, they began to write. We began to meet on Zoom. We called it Zoom 203, like we do here today. And we began to share and read and cry and weep and celebrate and edit. And a book was born. There were 50 student authors who were bold enough, like those original freedom writers, to tell their story. Just like those original freedom writers, these stories are heart-wrenching. They are harrowing, but they're also heroic. Because just like Tony, Alive at Midnight, tomorrow is the promise and the possibility that it gets better. And I think those stories are just that. So if you are a voracious reader and you are looking for something to read in the spring or even the summer, I'm going to ask to put on the screen the cover of our book. Oh, check it out, check it out. This is the cover and the back of our book. There's an ISB number, which is a fancy word, like it's ready to go into the world. It's been written. It's been edited. It's been proofread. I've had more sleepless nights now than I did then. But in this amazing book, there are 50 storytellers who are between the age of 10 and 50 all over the globe. A young boy from Kurdistan who was seeking asylum in Germany, he wrote a story. There's a young writer who was Maori in New Zealand. There's a young writer who is determined to use his language in his native tongue, in his native country of Greenland. These stories are real. They're about saying a name like Breonna Taylor, or being afraid during a knee on a neck, is my dad gonna come home at night? Or young kids who have two dads who just wanna know, why are people pressing me? And with each of those stories, there is a solution. A bold freedom writer or a freedom writer teacher wrote back and said, I was exactly where you were, and here I am today. The cover of the book is especially poignant for me because it was taken days, literally days, after we visited that very school where that 13-year-old boy lost his life. So those young people who are smiling and hugging Ty and Shanita, my two freedom writers, they're middle school kids, 6th and 7th and 8th graders, who now understand PTSD because the desk was empty at their school. Their friend died at school. There was bystanders who didn't leap in and help, but they took out their phones and they posted on social media for likes. And the world and the media descended on their school. So I love, in this place of pain, there's still purpose. I love in this photograph, it emanates great joy and purpose, because I think we're all just a little perfectly imperfect. So I love this cover. I love this book. It will be out in the spring. So the next thing I want to show you is I'd like you to mark a calendar. In the past, you could tie a little string around your finger. You might write on your hand. Well, with technology, you could mark it. You could let the world know that you need to get this book in your hands come March 29th. So on March 29th, this book is going to be released for the world. So let's look at what's coming to the world. March 29th, 2022, you can read, you could celebrate, you can high five a kid, you can do just about anything when it comes to celebrating. Oh, Narada, freedom writer Narada, who I started with, talking about full circle. Let's put up Narada's picture as he points to the world in front of that flag in Washington, D.C. Narada just wrote in our chat room, man, lots of A's, lots of N, man, the world ain't ready for dear freedom writer. I hope they are ready, Narada, because you wrote a story in Dear Freedom Writer as a response to a young writer in pain, a young writer who had something happen to them that shouldn't happen to anyone in their youth, in their innocence. And that youth and that innocence was stripped. And you stepped up, you stood up, and you wrote from a place of pain, from a place of acknowledgement. I wept then when I read your story and your response, Narada, and I'm fighting back tears now, looking straight at you with that finger to the world, because what you were able to do with that response was to be a lighthouse for someone who just desperately needed to know that when I cry, I don't want it to fall on deaf ears. So you were listening. You received it. You're going to hold someone's hand through some hard times. You're going to believe. You're going to hashtag. You're going to do anything and everything to strip away stigmas and stereotypes, whether they are gender. You're going to be a man that lifts up someone who was in pain. So I want to thank you. I want to say I want the world to be ready, Narada, because I want this story that you responded to not to happen to another kid, to another author, to another freedom writer. So I hope the world is ready. I thank you for your blood, sweat, and tears. I thank each and every one of these kids for being willing to put it out there, to write and write and write again. I love that these kids want the world to hear those cries. I want these kids to realize that it's got to get better, that when the world's not right, when the world's not normal, out of the mouth of a babe, out of the mouth of a kid, can't we listen? Can't we motivate ourselves to act? Can't we, as readers and writers and storytellers, be that ear, be that shoulder, be that heart that beats for them? So I thank all of you for joining us on this Giving Tuesday. We thank all of you that donated. We thank all of you that listened to our favorite Freedom Forums. We thank all of you who've been a part of this journey, whether you were an author, a freedom writer, a teacher, a nurse, to the Hunters of the world, to the Wendy's and the college hospitals, to the Anthonys in Texas, to each and every one that we gather and hold dear. Do just that. Go squeeze somebody. Go listen to somebody. Go pay it forward. Find your passion and your purpose. On this Giving Tuesday, it's about giving. Yes, we know all about those Black Fridays that disrupt our Thanksgiving. Yes, we know about Cyber Monday, but I think that what Giving Tuesday teaches all of us is that it's not about us and what we buy. It's about what we give. So give it yourself, give your love, give it to someone in need. I thank you all for spending the last 12 hours with us. I've been in this chair for 12 hours. It's time to stretch. It's time to move. I might even need to hydrate. But I thank each and every one of you for your time, for your talent, and especially those that have donated your treasure. Here's to Giving Tuesday. Here's to giving of your heart. Thank each and every one of you. Bye.